Good morning. Thank you, everyone, for coming. My name is Dadisi Najib. I am your hearing officer today for the Department of Public Works, and Ms. Stevens is our clerk for this hearing. This hearing is being recorded. A sign-in sheet is over on the table at the side of the room. Please make sure that you sign in so that once we have the director's recommendations, you'll be able to be updated for that, and then we can contact you in the future as well if we have to address any items that you're here for today. So the public hearing that we're here for today, we'll be hearing 9 items. My job as a hearing officer is to gather information on the facts for the hearing items, listen to your testimonies, and help our director make a decision. Director Nero will be making the final decision. I'm to have my recommendations to him within 10 days, and then you should be hearing a follow-up shortly thereafter. So the hearing will proceed as follows. I will call the item. I'll ask our Public Works representative to present, and then we'll have the appellant, anyone that's here to speak on behalf of the item from the public, and then we'll have the applicant speak last. So today, our first item, permit number 18WR-0095 for the location at 2760 Vallejo Street. I understand that they've requested a continuance, so we won't be hearing that item today.
Sure. Melanie Sengupta, outside counsel for Verizon Wireless. I was just wondering if Mr. and Mrs. Park are here today? We've only corresponded with them via email and phone calls, but we wanted to request a continuance to continue conversations with them.
For that item number?
Correct.
The first one? Okay, great.
2760 Vallejo Street.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so the hearing will proceed as follows. I'll call the item. City staff has up to 5 minutes to present the item. Then I'll give the appellant 5 minutes to speak. And then lastly, the applicants will have up to 5 minutes. Comments should be addressed to me and not the department. If you can't finish your comments within the allotted time, you'll have the option to submit a written testimony to me by the end of the hearing. The clerk will monitor all the speakers. When you hear the first bell, that means the speaker will have 30 seconds left to speak, and a second louder bell will signal that the time is up. After public comments are complete, I'll close the item. We'll now begin the hearing. First up is permit number 18WR-0185, GTE MobileNet of California Limited Partnership Verizon Wireless for the location at 2735 Green Street. Public Works?
Good morning. My name is Leo Palacios, and I will give an overview of the wireless permitting process. The city has limited authority over personal wireless service facilities. Wireless facilities are regulated at the federal level with limited local control, allowing some oversight of design. All authority invested to the city regarding these facilities is restricted to Public Works Code Article 25 and Public Works Order 184504. The process includes review by San Francisco Public Works, the Planning Department, and the Health Department. If all departments recommend approval of the application, the city issues a tentative approval, and the applicant posts and mails this notice to any person owning property or living within 150 feet of the facility. There is a 20-day protest period, and if Public Works receives an objection to this notice, as we have for the applications on today's agenda, Public Works convenes a hearing. We have provided the hearing officer, the Planning Department, and the Health Department with all the objections. Additionally, the applicant has responded to each protest. Public Works Code, Article 25, Section 1513H, which I have here, provide all available grounds the city may lawfully use to deny a personal wireless service facility permit. The first ground is if the Health Department incorrectly determined that the application meet Article 25's health compliance standard. This would mean that the facility would not comply with the Federal Communication Commission's emissions guidelines. The second ground is if the planning department incorrectly determined that the application meets the tier compatibility standards. This would mean that the facility would significantly detract from the defining characteristics of the adjacent neighborhood. The third ground does not apply to today's application since none of them are proposed adjacent to a city park or open space. The fourth and fifth grounds is if Article 25's requirements for obtaining a wireless permit are not being fulfilled, or that there is a proposed modification to the design and that modification would not comply with Article 25 standards. For all the applications on today's agenda, we believe the tentative approval was issued correctly. The Health Department found that all the applications meet Article 25's health standard, and under federal law, the city cannot deny an application for emissions concerns if the facility is found to meet FCC guidelines. Additionally, the planning department found that all applications meet the tier standards and will not significantly detract from the defining characteristics of the adjacent neighborhoods. Finally, there is no evidence in Public Works possession that demonstrate that these applications will not comply with Article 25 and Order 184-504 standards and requirements. Finally, Public Works has noticed that a majority of the protests filed for these applications centered around health concerns. So we wanted to briefly add in some comments about the inspection and enforcement of wireless facilities. If Public Works decides to approve these permits and the applicants install the facility within 30 business days of completing the installation, the applicant will need to file a verified statement from a registered professional engineer that the installed facilities comply with the public health compliance standards. We will be here if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any appellants here for 2735 Green Street?
Hi, good morning. My name is Giselle Cordestani, and I'm here to oppose.
Hold on just a second, I'm sorry.
5 minutes?
Yes.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
My name is Giselle Cordestani, and I'm here to oppose this proposed antenna that's being added to right in front of my house across the street. I live at 2740 Green Street. I bought the house in 2008, 11 years ago, for $12 million. This is a historic and affluent block because of the Lion Street steps, because of the Russian embassy is right next door. The planning department has actually categorized almost every single house on this block as a historically significant house, and that the collection of houses on this block are historically significant. I would love to show. You can see the arrow shows to the proposed antenna, and my house is highlighted in the across the road, and so it directly impacts where I live for a couple of reasons. One, there are no above-ground utilities on this block at all, and this would be introducing for the first time ever on this block an above-ground utility. We don't have any bus lines or no above-ground wires at all. These buildings and the collection of buildings have also been stated by the planning department that they contribute to the neighborhood's first wave of development in San Francisco. They call it the first Bay traditional style. These homes were all built between 1880 and 1930. We also believe that it's unnecessary to add the Verizon antenna here. We get great service. Many of us are customers of Verizon. I'm a businesswoman. I do not oppose having wireless service in the area, but it is completely unnecessary to have it on this block. Even 1 block away, they could add it where there are already public utility lines above ground and bus lines above ground. And
What location is that?
on Union Street, same location between Broderick and Baker, 1 block away.
Thank you.
Personally, for us, it will also create a nuisance visually. The proposed antenna and the boxes that will be added are not only right outside of my kids' bedrooms, but will also be visible from our only terrace. We have a view going up the back to Broadway, and I'll show you the pictures that currently, if we're seated outside when we eat, we will not see the antenna. We don't see the lamppost, but this proposed antenna will actually be visible. So currently, this is from within my house, looking at the back terrace where we sit outside and eat lunches and dinners, you do not see the lamppost. The proposed antenna, actually, you can see this little orange flash will be significantly viewable from our back garden. When you walk out to the terrace and look onto our neighbor's house, you do not see, because it's a lovely lamppost. But here are the proposed changes of what that will look like. There are no other above-ground utilities on this street. There's no boxes, there are no wires. As you can see, the view is spectacular. It's of an old historic district that has been classified by the city of San Francisco as historic. I think that's it. I think that they addressed our concerns for medical concerns, and they've also addressed our concerns of noise. They said there is absolutely no noise, but that will be admitted. But one of the concerns we did have was that there would be noise. Obviously, we're all concerned as mothers. I have a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 1-year-old who will be sleeping 12 feet away from this box and spending 20 hours a day near this antenna, which scares me, but they're saying that it is going to be completely healthy and there's no issues concerning, the wireless technology.
So your primary concern now is
The value of
visibility?
my home and visibility.
Visibility and just
And the
sight
val-
lines.
The value of my home. This is an incredibly wealthy area. It's an extremely expensive home. There's no other utility blocking our view above ground, and it is precisely straight across from our windows and from where we eat and where we enjoy our time. And I'm concerned that it's introducing something that'll devalue the entire neighborhood.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next. Anyone else speak on this item from the community? Neighbors? Okay. The applicant?
Good morning, Melanie Sengupta, outside counsel for Verizon Wireless. So this is a photo simulation of the facility that we're talking about here. So there are obviously some utilities above ground here. Light standards have to be above ground to be functional. This is part of a longstanding program in San Francisco. Verizon and the other carriers worked with planning, DPW, DPH, the Department of Technology, and the Historic Preservation Committee and other city agencies to develop this current design. So this design is approved by the Historic Preservation Commission. The antenna is hidden within a discrete tapered shroud, as you can see here. The protester has brought up a few issues that I'd like to address. The first is with respect to radio frequency emissions. The FCC has primary jurisdiction over radio frequency emissions, and they establish what the emission exposure levels should be. They work with the EPA, the FDA, the National Institutes of Health, and other federal agencies to set these exposure limits. And the city's job here is to ensure that these facilities comply with the exposure limits. So San Francisco requires Verizon to hire a third-party engineer to do that analysis. I have Daniel Rowe with Hammett and Edison here today to answer any questions. He submits a report to the city. DPH reviews that report and issues a recommendation. That recommendation here was to approve this facility. The exposure levels are a fraction of a percent of what the FCC's exposure levels are. With respect to aesthetics, the planning department also reviews these sites. And here the planning department acknowledged that this is adjacent to a historic resource, and when the protesters submitted complaints of view obstruction, planning actually issued a supplemental response to the protesters and addressed those concerns. With respect to noise, these facilities don't have any moving parts, and therefore they don't generate any noise. With respect to views, this is an undesignated street by the general plan, so in terms of street views, it's not entitled to that higher protection by Article 25 for street views. It is with respect to historical resources, and again, planning reviewed it under that standard. The last thing that the protester brought up were property values and the fact that this shouldn't be here because this is an affluent neighborhood. There is federal case law that says jurisdictions can't take into account property values with respect to entitling wireless facilities. And I will leave it at that unless you have any questions. And again, Daniel Rowe is here to answer any RF-related questions.
Just a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible to relocate the antenna on Union Street as was suggested?
And I will call up Agatha Cajeas from Modus to address how we selected this site and why this pole ultimately was the one that was selected for this service area. She will walk through the other poles that we looked at and why the pole that the protester has identified isn't feasible.
Okay, and then one other quick question.
Sure.
The antenna on top of this is an existing pole, right?
Correct.
Will it be the same color or will it be, it's the same color?
That's one of the conditions
All right.
that the city attaches. It has to be painted to be the same color.
Okay.
It's 2 feet high.
That was my next question.
Okay.
It's 2 feet?
I'm sorry, we should
Excuse me, just a
we should
second.
be more clear. So in terms of net height increase, this antenna, I'm sorry, the pole with the antenna on it will be 2 feet taller than the existing pole.
Thank you.
Oh, here. These are the approved plans that show, I'm sorry, I'm going to pull this up for a moment so I can read this. The top of the existing luminaire is 30 feet 2 inches, and the top of the concealment shroud, once the facility is complete, will be 32 feet. And that's right here on these plans.
Thank you. Sir, can I ask you to hold your comments? I'll allow you to speak when she gets finished if you want to address anything.
Good morning. My name is Agatha Cajeas, and I'm here with Modus on behalf of Verizon to speak about site selection for this particular site. So when searching for potential sites, we're limited to a variety of constraints. Verizon network engineers identify an area of need for improved service and then reaches out to our company with a small radius in which to locate the least intrusive location for a new facility. In this way, we're constrained to a limited area determined by Verizon engineers. Some automatic disqualifying characteristics are presence of traffic signal or traffic lights on poles, other SFMTA infrastructure already present on poles, PUC point of connection or path of power. And then for all poles, we also consider potential tree abatement, proximity to balconies or windows, and view shed issues. As part of our due diligence, we evaluated alternate locations within the immediate vicinity and determined this location as the least intrusive means of providing a solution to meet the engineering needs of the network. So on this particular block, we evaluated other poles, and we disqualified trying to find the least intrusive means. We found proximity to balconies, which we disqualify. We also found more visually intrusive due to lesser setbacks or to topography and elevation change. As for moving the location, there is a network of existing and proposed nodes. So we do try to avoid proximity to other proposed or existing nodes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just state for the record that what they're adding is actually 4 feet, and the way they're measuring it is inaccurate. And so the plans, these are their proposed plans. The actual antenna post is 4 feet that they're adding, but what they're telling you, it is only 2 feet higher than the lamp on the lamp post. But the entire antenna that is adding from the top of the post
I got
here, you understand?
I understand.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here to speak on this item, 2735 Green Street? Okay. Okay, I'll allow her when she arrives after we hear all of the other items to either submit to me in writing or to share her comments at that time when she arrives. Thank you. Okay, if there's no one else, we're going to close out item number 18WR0185, or stay it until we hear from the next, if the next resident arrives at the end. Next up is item number 18WR0214 for the location at 2300 Filbert Street. In the interest of time, Leo, do you want to not review your spiel for each one, or what do you typically do in this case?
Hello, Leo
Hi.
Palacios. Yes, I agree. That initial
We'll cover all
brief,
of
we'll
the...
cover all applications.
Okay,
That is
perfect.
correct.
Thank you. Excellent. Is there anyone here to speak on 2300 Filbert Street? Any appellants, protesters for 2300 Filbert Street? Okay, is the applicant, do you wish to speak on 2300 Fillmore Street? Okay, all right. Well, that was fast. If there's no one here and Verizon is opting to also have their same comments applied to that, then we're going to go ahead and close out 2300 Filbert Street. Next up is 18WR0303 for 2582 Filbert Street. Is there anyone here? Okay. Verizon has stated that they will also have their comments applied to this permit item. Next up is 18WR0299 for 2700 Pierce Street. Please state your name. Did you sign in?
I did.
Okay, great.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. I'm Louise Bea, and I live with my family at 2727 Pierce Street, and
Okay.
thank you for being here today for us. I would like to respectfully protest the placement of the facility at 2700 Pierce Street, and I would like to protest on the basis of the Tier 2 or Tier B compatibility, because this would significantly detract from the defining characteristics of our neighborhood. So I'd like to show you the houses at the intersection. Okay, is this, let's see. Okay. This is the house at 2701 Pierce Street, and it was built in 1905. And so that is one side of the intersection. This is the house at 2670 Pierce Street, and it was built in 1907. And you can see here is a historic streetlight, which is directly on, opposite the corner of the proposed installation. This is the home at 2700 Pierce Street. It was built in 1907. And this is the streetlight, which is the subject of this proposal. This is at the same intersection. It's 2501 Vallejo Street. It was built in 1906, and it was used to be the Norwegian Seamen's Home.
Okay.
Additionally, there's a landmark house on the block. This is the Casebolt House, and this is my house. It's San Francisco landmark number 51. And it was built in 1867. So what the neighbors would like is to have the ability to put what would be more appropriate, historically appropriate, at this location, which would be a historic lamp post, which would not be possible if the Verizon facility was installed. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Oh, were you finished? Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else from the neighborhood that wishes to speak on this item? Yeah.
So here again is a photo sim of the facility we're talking about. And to be clear, we are not disputing the beauty of this neighborhood, the historic nature of the district, or of these buildings. This is an excellent view street as determined by the general plan, and the planning department conducted their analysis on that basis. Again, this design has been approved by the city for these streetlights. They're discreet and tapered, and most people walking by don't notice them and know what they are. Thank you.
I have a question.
Sure.
Has anyone considered in historic neighborhoods making these towers more aesthetically in line with the neighborhood that you're planning to put them in?
I actually don't know who owns the historic light poles. I don't know if those are run by SFPUC or if that's part of a different program. Unfortunately, the light standards are owned by PUC, so they dictate a lot as to what the pole will look like, what will work for their infrastructure that needs to be there as well. So we're somewhat limited in that regard. There were other designs put forth before the city back in 2014, 2015, when this whole process took off, and this was what the city had chosen. In terms of variety of designs, I can't tell you what they were in terms of things that weren't on poles. I didn't live through that process, but this was what the city selected.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you. Okay. We are closing out item number 18WR02. Yeah, you can, because you didn't use up your whole 5 minutes, so I'll let you go ahead and
Thank you.
respond. Yes, ma'am.
I have been researching the historic light poles and have been informed that so long as the Verizon facility doesn't go on them, the neighbors can pay to have these light standards switched to the historic. And it's done through the PUC, or it's done through the city. But the residents can request and pay to have these changed.
I have one more quick question for you. When you spoke earlier, like right before you finished, you said that your neighborhood's plan was to put an additional, to add another light post.
No,
You didn't?
I misspoke. The reason we don't want this facility is because we would like to replace this light pole
With
a
a
historic light
one.
pole.
Got you.
And directly across the street is the historic light pole that I showed.
So
on
you
the-
wanted them to match?
Yes, yes.
Got you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to close out the item located at 2700 Pierce Street. Next up is item number 18WR0306 for the location at 2940 Turk Boulevard. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak on this item? Okay, and Verizon's representative has already stated that they wanted to have their spiel applied to all of the items here today. I'm going to go ahead and close that one out for 2940 Turk Boulevard if there's no one here to speak on that. Next up is item number 18WR0350 for the location at 724 Irving Street. We have an appellant here who wishes to speak. Hi, good morning.
Good morning. My name is Kathy Cohn. I understand that most of the challenges to the installation of these wireless antennas is only on the basis of views and kind of not to diminish the superficial matters, because unfortunately it has been written apparently nationally that cities cannot challenge the installation of these seriously health detracting matters. I'm a healthcare practitioner. I can tell you that everyone in my field, many of the people in my field, are all talking and trying to create more awareness around the issues around EMFs, and I want to highlight some matters. Many leading EMF scientists say EMF should be classified as a Class 1 definite carcinogen, like smoking and asbestos. New technologies like the 5G networks are being rolled out at a frantic pace, while zero biological studies prove their safety. EMF safety standards haven't been updated since 1996 and are based on short-term exposure to one device. In other words, the safety that was conducted, albeit questionable science, had nothing to do with the reality of what we're currently living with and what 5G presents. Growing children's brains are especially at risk, as their head absorbs 2 times the radiation compared to adults. Israel has banned Wi-Fi from their schools for this reason. Each time we jump from one generation of wireless technology to another, the amount of EMFs we are all being exposed to increases exponentially. In 1996, we had 17,000 antennas. 5G 2019 and beyond will have 13 million antennas by 2025. Recently, Brussels, Belgium, and Geneva, Switzerland have decided to stop installing the latest 5G technologies until more studies are conducted. Why? In a recent letter sent to officials of the European Union, Dr. Martin Paul from Washington State University explained that 5G is being rolled out without a single biological test to prove its safety on humans, animals, and nature. And he is hardly alone. There are hundreds of independent scientists and tens of thousands of concerned individuals worldwide who are sounding this alarm. To make matters worse, 5G will require the installation of tens of millions of new small cell antennas just in the U.S. And we're talking about 3 to 12 homes in residential areas and every single block, nearly every single block in downtown areas. And considering that thousands and thousands of peer-reviewed studies have already shown that 2G through 4G technologies are linked to insomnia, fatigue, brain fog, and cancer, does it really make sense to be If you want more science, in the 2013 groundbreaking paper by Martin Paul, he shows that extremely low levels of EMFs can activate our cells' voltage-gated calcium channels. This basically creates a lot of oxidative stress on our bodies and is thought to be one of the mechanisms of how EMFs are greatly detracting from our health. So I appreciate that this evidence, and there is evidence, plenty of evidence if people want to look, about the issues around EMFs may not be considered in terms of these various applications and where the city stands. The city really needs to, for a city like San Francisco, where safety seems to be such a concern, we're missing the big elephant in the room. And how are we going to put the genie back in the bottle when our entire terrain is covered in these antennas? And so I am once again trying to protest an installation of another antenna, which is within 1.5 blocks of 2 other antennas already in the neighborhood. I don't understand this.
What location is that?
There's one on Irving, on the corner of 10th Avenue, and there's one on 9th Avenue between Lincoln and Irving. And truthfully, the one thing that, even in protesting this, what really scares me, it's bad that this is in the neighborhood, and we need more voices who are creating awareness and getting people in places of decision-making to start asking the right questions, start challenging these interests. It's now big wireless has replaced big pharma as far as who's running the show, and that there are rules in place that are impeding cities' independence to make decisions for themselves about how they want to conduct their environment in their city and how it affects their people's health. And the last thing, I just again want to mention fatigue, sleep, headaches, brain fog, depression, and infertility. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Combs.
Good morning.
Hi,
My name
good
is
morning.
Laurel Ferguson, and I'm a consultant for AT&T. So most of the concerns brought up today were in regards to the RF emissions of this proposed facility. And when proposing new wireless facilities, AT&T and all the carriers are subject to very strict guidelines, not only by the City of San Francisco Department of Public Health, but also the Federal Communications Commission. And our emission standards are well below those limits. In addition, as a part of our application, AT&T had to have an independent third-party radio frequency expert perform an analysis to ensure that the proposed wireless facility would be compliant with all FCC radio frequency exposure guidelines. This report, which we provided to the appellant, shows that we are well below those limits. Additionally, the City of San Francisco Public Health Department has reviewed the project and the third-party analysis and provided us with an approval. Do you have any questions in regards to the RF?
No, thank you
Standards.
very much.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Okay, we have 2 more items left. We're closing out 18WR0350 if there are no more comments for 724 Irving Street. Please, if you haven't, make sure that you sign in so that we have your information. Just a little reminder. Next up, we have 2 more to hear. Next up is 18WR0372 for 428 Amaturi Loop.
Hi, should we all introduce ourselves? We have, yes,
Okay.
yes, all the same for each of the committee members. Okay. Hi, my name is Kathy Yu. We have,
Okay. Will you all be speaking individually
Um,
or?
I have one statement. It's 7 minutes long, though. So if you want,
5 minutes?
we'll continue
Okay,
it.
all
Hi.
right.
So my name is Kathy Yu, and I live with my family at 2600 Lion Street. Thank you for considering our protest to the tentative approval of a wireless service facility 18WR0372. I am providing a copy of my statement and numerous exhibits for the record. I first want to reiterate our objection to the address listed on the notice for this proposed facility. Although the facility appears to be proposed for the top of a street lamp across from 2626 Lion Street, Exhibit A, the official notice continues to list the proposed address as 428 Amaturi Loop, which is more than 2 miles from the actual address, which is Exhibit B. We just happened to see that the photo and the original notice looked like it was proposed for Lion Street. I looked at the photo and I thought, that's my neighbor's house. Or we would have ignored the notice as not being anywhere near the vicinity of our home within the Lion Steps corridor. The use of this address 2 miles away, Exhibit C, continues to be very deceptive and do not believe it gives sufficient notice to those who might be interested in objecting to the proposed placement within the Lion Steps corridor. Second, I'm here to offer our substantial evidence that the proposed facility across from 2626 Lion Street is not compatible with the unique character of the Lion Steps corridor. Proposing this visual blight within the Lion Steps corridor is not compatible with the history of the Lion Steps corridor, the aesthetics of the corridor, which depend directly on preserving the beauty of the visual landscape, the constantly high volume of foot traffic along the corridor, including walkers, runners, everyday passerbyers, and many, many tourists. The unusual private-public partnership between the owners along the corridor who provide the funds and maintenance to sustain the landscaping along the corridor. Preservation of the high property values of the homes that contribute to and reflect the uniqueness of the Lion Steps corridor. I will briefly describe the corridor within which the facility is proposed in Exhibit D. As you walk south up Lion Street from the Lombard gates of the Presidio, all of the above-ground wiring and cabling ends at Union. Along this section of Lion Street, the Presidio Trust cleans the sidewalk regularly, and the city sweeps the street weekly as compared to every other week for the rest of the neighborhood. This is because of the very high pedestrian traffic along the corridor. Rain or shine, a constant stream of pedestrians walk up the Lion Steps corridor from Union Street all the way up to Broadway. A neighbor has observed with video evidence over 1,000 people and 100 cars pass through the Lion Street corridor on a Saturday. I observe this pedestrian traffic and clean up after it on a daily basis from my home across from the proposed facility. As you can see from the photo of the school group walking with their umbrellas along the corridor, which is Exhibit E, the proposed facility is directly above their umbrellas and it clearly stands out in this unique landscape. While the street lamp itself may be necessary for safety, this proposed facility is not a safety feature and would add substantial visual blight to the corridor. Our home is one of the first original homes within the Lion Steps corridor at the corner of Green and Lion. As the historic photos from 1918, 1920, and 1927 show on Exhibit F, our home was built in 1916, Exhibit G, and you'll see that my home is in the corner. It looks exactly the same. It is approximately 100 feet from the proposed facility. Just south of the proposed facility on the west side of Lion Street is a cluster of 6 homes built in 1923, known as the Miranda Land Grant houses in Exhibit H. These houses are historically preserved and the owners may not change their exterior appearance. One of these houses is known as the Princess Diaries House at 2601 Lion, which attracts additional pedestrian and tourist traffic, including movie tour buses that unload tourists within the corridor to see where the movie was filmed, as in the photo Exhibit I. You'll see the tour bus on Exhibit I, and there's the Princess House. In the heart of the corridor, at the base of the Lion Steps, is the Oval Center, which was the historic watering hole for the Presidio horses. The oval center is planted with redwood and cypress trees and a garden. I am one of the owners along the corridor that donated substantial money to maintain the landscape of this oval, Exhibit J. The line steps themselves were designed by Louis Upton in 1916, Exhibit K. As you walk up the 2 blocks of stairs, you see beautiful gardens. The neighbors along the steps, including Senator Dianne Feinstein at 2460 Lyon Street, which is just 3 houses away from mine, tend to these gardens, Exhibit L, so they privately pay for them. The payoff for climbing up Lyon Street and the steps is the famous view from the top. As our numerous exhibits submitted to you described, the Lyon Steps corridor is regularly featured in tourist books, Exhibit M, and websites as a top attraction for visitors to San Francisco. TripAdvisor reviewers describe it as a picturesque panorama with fantastic and unbelievable views. As the Board of Supervisors noted when it adopted this ordinance requiring permits for wireless facilities, San Francisco is widely recognized to be one of the world's most beautiful cities. San Francisco's beauty is vital to our tourist industry and why many residents and businesses locate here. The Lyon Steps corridor is an especially unique San Francisco landmark due to its visual landscape.
Thank you.
And then we'll submit that. No, I have one more sentence, but you can read that. We're just protesting
Yeah, I have
this.
your comments here. Were you given an explanation why they listed it at
They
428
said they
Amateur Loop?
consider the Presidio as one parcel, even though it's 45-minute walk away.
Okay.
All right. It was very deceptive.
But you all nevertheless received notification?
We
the
received
people-
notification, and if we hadn't looked at the picture, we would not have paid attention to 428 Amaturi.
Actually, I did not receive a notification.
Okay. Okay. So they sent notices out from the actual location on Lyon Street, though, right? For the, whatever the requirement
Yes.
is to, okay, got you.
As a address, but
I
then
got
it doesn't
you.
even indicate on the,
Okay.
So most of us, when you receive so much mail, you
Right.
open it up, and we saw the Amaturi loop.
Right.
And so we just discarded it
Right.
until somebody in our neighborhood took the time, Kathy,
Okay.
to really drill down and look.
Okay.
And then suddenly, we were made aware of this. But,
Okay.
our neighbor Dianne Feinstein may not even be aware of this because of that deceptive address.
Okay.
And the other piece of this is, there is a notice on the pole,
Mm-hmm.
but it is on the other side of the pole, and that is the side of the street where there are no houses. So many of us don't walk along that side of the street.
Gotcha.
because there are no houses there, so none of us saw the actual posting of the announcement.
Okay.
So if possible, we'd like to request another hearing if it comes to that,
On the
because of that.
base that you feel that
It was
folks weren't notified? Okay.
but we also provide evidence today, and we would like the committee to consider it.
Okay, did you two want to speak individually,
I
or?
think she
Pardon?
summarized.
Yeah, I think Kathy summarized it. I would just like to add that since this has been made apparent in our neighborhood and some of the people have been made aware, there has been one sale of a home, and that house sold for under asking. And while there may be many reasons for that, as a licensed Realtor, I do know that it does reduce the house value when this is made apparent.
When what's made apparent?
So the house was actually listed. I don't know if it was listed right before or during this process. And the selling price, they had to disclose it. And the selling price that they got went under asking, which is very unusual for our neighborhood. And
2 weeks ago.
we suppose that this may have been a contributing factor, because otherwise the property was, a stellar property.
Okay, thank you. If there's no one else to speak on this item, did you want to respond, Melanie? Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Just forgot.
So again, here we are in a historic district with average street views as designated by the general plan. And so planning has conducted their analysis, taking those two standards into account. Those standards are articulated in Article 25, which was recently upheld by the California Supreme Court. Now, with respect to noticing, unfortunately, poles aren't assigned street addresses the way homes are. They're assigned numbers, which helps nobody in terms of lay people. And I'm happy to submit this correspondence. There was some email back and forth between MODIS and DPW and planning as to what the correct address for this pole should be. And they had said that it's 428 to 434 Amatory Loop because it's on that parcel. Here is who actually gets noticed. So when MODIS determines, Article 25 establishes the radius, and MODIS did it from where the pole is.
Okay.
And so all the correct people you can see within the noticing radiuses were actually noticed.
Okay.
So we apologize for the confusion, but it just has to do with the fact that poles aren't themselves assigned addresses. A
Do you
couple
have
of
a copy
things.
of the letter?
Sure.
If there's a copy of the letter, can you send it to me? I don't need to see it like right now.
Sure.
But later, if you
Of
could.
the noticing affidavit saying who was noticed or which letter?
No, just the content, the language in the letter.
That provides notice?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
The protesters brought up a couple of other points, both of which are outside of the scope of Article 25, but I'll address them anyway. One was they were showing pictures and the number of people who are in this area in terms of tourists, which demonstrates the need for this facility. Those are the data demands. And again, with respect to property values, which they also brought up and touched on, there are just as many studies that say that property values increase with better reception as there are that say decrease. And federal law again says that cities can't take that into account either way. It's all speculative.
Okay.
Were there any other questions?
No.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay. Is here. Okay. I'll let her address at the very end. Was there anyone else? Yes.
We also didn't receive a copy of the packet that protesters provided to you.
We didn't do this for you.
We did it for her and the committee.
Okay. I can scan it and send it to you.
Okay, thank you.
This one and
We need to give her, I mean, they very receptive us. I mean, it was.
Yeah, it has to be part of the file, so you have, if they request it, you have to give it to them.
thank you. I'll provide her a copy. It's okay. Thank you very much. This was very thorough. I really appreciate it. Please, can you speak into the microphone? And
So AT&T or Verizon talked about, the tourists coming. Yes, there is a ton of tourists, but they're coming for the view, not to have cell coverage.
okay, thank you. I appreciate everyone's comments thus far. We're going to go ahead and close this item number out and make sure that, again, that you've left your contact information so that you'll be notified once our director's made his decision, his final decision. So I'm going to close out order number 18WR0372 for 428 Amatory Loop, which is actually on Lion Street.
Exactly.
Thank you very much. I apologize for that. Okay, next up, 18WR0429 for the location at 2430 Broadway Street. And Public Works has already made their comments across the board for all of these items, so if we could have the appellant or protester speak. Thank you.
Call up the overhead projection system, please. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Brett Gladstone. I'm an attorney at Hanson Bridget, and I am representing appellants Mary Jo Kaplan and Todd Kaplan. First of all, I wanted to mention that we have not seen any environmental clearance from the city for this proposal. I recently found a case, by the way, that deals with aesthetics in a California Third District Court of Appeals I'd like to talk about. But before I talk about the case, let me show you an example of what the aesthetics here look like. Maybe we could zoom in a little bit, please. Anyway, that's only showing part of it, unless we can zoom in a bit. Excuse me? This one here? Oh, thank you. Oh, I see. Thank you very much. Maybe we can restart the clock. Thank you. Thank you. Anyway, under a Third District Court of Appeal from last year, there is a ruling that neighbors can be just as much experts on aesthetic values as anybody with degrees in the same, including architects. The court is Georgetown Preservation Society versus County of El Dorado. And I'm going to hand in that case for you, and you can see that it states that an inadequate aesthetic impact analysis required the county to go back to the beginning with a much more substantial environmental review, and we hereby request that there be a substantial environmental review and there not be simply a categorical exemption from environmental review. And we believe that under the case that at least a negative declaration under California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, is necessary here. I'm going to hand you at the end a petition signed by owners of 60% of the property on this block, attesting to, among other things, the negative aesthetic impact and public safety impact. Now, your regulations state that you must deny a permit if it will obstruct views and or light into surrounding residents' windows, and no one has done site visits necessary to determine whether this is true. Your public notification document says that neighbors are allowed to ask for site visits from the city to make a determination of whether or not there will be obstruction of views and or light. That hasn't been done, and as per your public notice, the neighbors hereby ask that the planning department visit the homes of petition signers to investigate these claims, and until then, we feel that no permits should issue. There has also been some procedural due process errors as the required neighborhood notifications were not exactly correct. I'll let speakers after me speak about that a little bit more. Danger to public safety. These overhead wires can cause fires when transformers explode. Electrical outages are common, and in an emergency, neighbors could be subjected to fallen poles with live wires in the streets. Now, in Noe Valley in 2015, a Mylar party balloon actually caused a service loss to almost 10,000 customers, just as one example. And yet these poles get heavier and heavier as new equipment such as Verizon 5G equipment gets added to them. You can see how much is already added to them right here. I think given all the weight that's there and added to them, it's no surprise what you see right here. This is the pole in question. Already, due to the tremendous weight, it's leaning into a driveway. The driveway is just to the right of that flower bed on the left. As you can see, the bottom even encroaches in the driveway, but the top could prevent a car from getting in and poses a great safety danger. And this is just one example of how these things increasingly add weight and a dangerous situation. The undergrounding process for this block will commence fairly soon. 60% of property owners have signed a petition to send to the city to start the undergrounding process that they will pay for. So it seems to be a waste of city resources for this to go forward. The city has to do inspections. The city will have to redo the environmental process, process permits, oversee installation. And I think that that's really not worthwhile, especially since the decision in Verizon's favor today would be appealed to the Board of Appeals. And its installation, Verizon's installation will have to be done from scratch once the undergrounding begins. Finally, as stated in your public notice, DPW's written permit conditions state that Verizon should have in place a procedure for taking radio frequency power density level in the nearby dwellings when requested by members of the public. That hasn't been done, and we're hereby requesting that be done by DPW for the homes of those who have signed the petition, and we request that it occur in every building before permits are issued. Thank you very much. I'm going to hand these things in.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Stevens. Hi, I'm ready.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Mary Jo Tizer Kaplan. I don't live yet at 2411 Broadway. We've spent the last 2 years making this house inhabitable. It had lots of structural and also health issues, making it entirely uninhabitable. We'll be able to move in January, and by that time, there'll be a 5G tower directly across our house, right in our view. We would never have bought the house had it been there in the first place. I understand that we're not allowed, based on laws developed in the 90s, to discuss health aspects of this. It feels a little bit backward, and it clearly was written by telecom lobbyists back in those days. Also, I just heard Verizon's attorney saying that discussing health risks is unreasonable because they're speculative. If the health risks are speculative, isn't it also speculative that these are harmless to us? It seems that they are not harmless, and certainly no studies have been done. I'd like to speak really quickly to something about San Francisco. One thing that I love about San Francisco is that we don't just follow some federal laws. We're a city that takes care of immigrants, that takes care of refugees, even when the federal government tells us not to. But in this instance, we're not even taking care of our own citizens. We're following these outdated federal laws that say that we can't fight for our own health against these intrusive new technologies. I've also spent just the past week gathering some signature petitions from our neighborhood to underground all of the wires. We've already got 60% signed. I think we're at 60% also notarized. I can give them to you, but I'm also supposed to give them to somebody at DPW, so I'll give them to you, but I'd ask for copies back later.
Okay, Mr. Gladstone said that, are they in his packet? Were they in his packet?
No, I've got the originals. He's got some that also were DocuSigned. I've got the notarized ones.
Don't send me your originals. You could email Department of Public Works just like a PDF copy of the signatures, and that'll be
I'm meeting later
sufficient.
with Eric Thrasher to hand him some of these. So we've basically already started.
Okay.
Yeah, we've started this process already of undergrounding these poles.
Right.
Another issue is that we weren't adequately notified.
Okay, he
We-
said you were going to speak to that.
Yeah. I didn't receive a notification at all. I've got 3 signed affidavits from other neighbors within the 150-foot circle that should have received notifications, said they did not.
Okay.
We've looked at the documentation that I requested per the Sunshine Ordinance that showed the names and addresses that were sent the notifications. 2 of them were sent to resident, where the residents' names were actually available. I've got the deeds, they're easy to get. I know who's there now because our lawyer was able to pull it. I don't know why Verizon or their partners weren't able to pull it. But I know that if I receive something that says resident, I'm not going to open it. So I would consider that very inadequate notification. A lot of the names were wrong. Things weren't addressed to both spouses, even if both spouses were owners. But the short of it is that we were not adequately notified. More of the neighbors that we have here have photos of what this tower would look like.
Okay.
It would definitely impede my view. The electrical wires, which we always had planned to have undergrounded, and now it's become more urgent, are somewhat impeding the view, but the tower that'll be placed above it, which I believe in our case is 10 feet? Well, 20. Will
20-foot
most
tower?
definitely be impeding our view. And again, our neighborhood is a historic district, and this is definitely.
Where are you all in the underground process in terms of the timeline, like how long it's expected to take?
Well,
it
the
goes through?
timeline as presented by the city has different steps, and we're already at step 3, which is the collection of the signatures, which I only found out Thursday needed to be notarized, which is why it sort of slowed us
Okay.
down a little
That's
bit.
okay.
So we've got that. So we've identified the region, which is the block. We've identified who the owners are. We've got everybody on board. We've got the right number of people who have signed. We've got a rough estimate of the cost, and everyone's agreed to it.
Okay, great. I think that was it. Do you have any other comments?
That would be it. That would be it for me for now.
Okay, thank you so much, Mrs. Kaplan,
Thank you.
for your comments.
Thanks.
Any other neighbors here that want to speak on the installation at 2430 Broadway?
Hello, I'm Steve Mohebbi, Mary Jo's direct next-door neighbor at 2417 Broadway.
Hi, thank you.
Hi. And forgive the broken record, but underscoring everything you've heard, this is a significant view blockage. Surely you've already seen what's been submitted, but it's not just a little dot on the pole. It's a big hike up from the pole, and you know, forgive the
going on
candor,
this
but
pole? Is it going on this pole?
it's yeah. Let me show you.
Okay,
Can I grab
all right.
that picture from you? So
Okay.
that's the pole. I'm the White House there on the right. Mary Jo's house has netting and scaffolding, just for
Got you.
context.
Okay.
So here, where my finger is, you can see it's a pretty significant protrusion, and you can see this is taken from way down in the block. You can imagine it's more dramatic if you're standing right in front of it or across the street.
Okay.
And you know, forgive the candor, but it's not an inexpensive neighborhood. Mary Jo underscored that in saying she would have never even purchased her home if she was aware that she'd be living across the street from a nasty-looking tower like that or antenna like that. Yeah, so view blockage and then the broken record you've heard. These are all going to be undergrounded. Why are we wasting time? I mean, let's just be.
Do you all have
Let's
any
have a
other
modicum of-
recommendations for other locations on that block or the end of the block or, okay,
I can tell you the next block to the west is already undergrounded,
okay,
so there are no poles there. I guess no, I would not have any recommendations.
okay.
But yeah, view and efficiency. This is the train's leaving the station on undergrounding, so let's just let's be
Okay,
efficient.
Great, thank you. Mr. Mojave, did you sign in? Did you sign in over there? Okay, yeah, please make sure, if anyone hasn't signed in, to please sign in. Hi, okay. Sign in before you leave.
Hi, Eliza Cash. I live right across the street from Mary Jo and Steve, and I have been there for 15 years, and when my husband and I bought this house, there were trees in front of our house. And one year we went away and they put this particular antenna in front of our front door. So that was like, I don't know, 10 years ago.
Okay.
And today, of course, I look at this particular light post every day from all of my windows facing south, every day. And I assure you, this light post, I'm sorry, I'm so emotional.
It's okay.
This light post is not what Verizon showed you. The streamlined light post with a 2-foot, 4-foot, whatever she wants to call it, that will go on, and it would be seamless. That is not true.
Okay.
Because you see this proposed antenna is very different from what she's showing you. I hope you agree.
Okay.
Whether we have a recommendation for another post, I don't think so, because I don't think you or anybody would want this post in front of their house.
Okay.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Cash. Are there any other neighbors here that want to address the location at 2430? Okay. Okay. Thank you.
This is a copy for her, and then you can do.
Oh, okay. I have that, so yeah,
But Verizon wants, and we don't want to inconvenience you.
okay, all right, thank you, I appreciate that. Thank you. So we're just waiting to hear from one more resident for Broadway Street, and then we'll hear from Verizon. Did you want, yes. We're waiting on you.
Hi, good morning.
Hi, good morning.
Sorry, I
Could
was
you
late.
state
My
your
daughter
name?
was sick this morning. I had to
That's
take her
okay.
to my
Wait. Are you here to
mother's.
speak on Broadway, or are you here to speak
I'm here to
on Green
speak
Street?
on 2735 Green Street, which is.
Oh, okay.
Sorry?
That's all right. Yeah.
Oh,
I
I'm
need to
sorry.
close out.
Someone told
That's
me I was
okay.
on.
Yeah, no, it's all right. I'll hear from you just as soon as we wrap this last one up. Okay, thank you. I thought we were waiting on one more person for Broadway. Okay, great.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Demi Bowles Lathrop. I live at 2421 Broadway in San Francisco, and I am here on behalf of opposing a G5 tower being erected on our street. I've been a resident in the home since 1981, and so I'm here to state my opposition.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Lathrop. Okay, are there any more neighbors to speak on this item? All right, we're going to go ahead and hear from Verizon. Its representative.
There have been a lot of points raised, so I am going to try to be quick and hit as many as I can, if not all of them. First of all, Ms. Cash is right. All the other sites that we have talked to up until, we've talked about this morning, up until this time, have been San Francisco PUC light standards. This is a PG&E utility pole. So this is a different category of sites, if you will, from what we've previously discussed. So Ms. Cash is right about that. This is a 4G, not a 5G facility. I heard some mixed messages about that.
Thank you for addressing.
Sorry?
I said thank you for addressing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the other thing I wanted to clarify before, when I was talking about things being speculative, if I spoke unclearly, I'm sorry. I meant property value is speculative, not health impacts. Now, with respect to the substantive issues that the protesters have raised, one of the issues that Mr. Gladstone raised, he had a close-up, and I don't have that picture here, but you can see it a little bit here, that the existing PG&E pole protrudes a little bit into the driveway. PG&E is requiring Verizon to replace this pole, and it will be replaced further away from the driveway. So it will move over a little bit. PG&E, as well as the city, also deals with the structural calculations that deals with any tilt or any of those other issues that he had responded. Part of why these facilities need to be taller than the light standards we talked about before, you can see here that there are transmission lines here. GO 95, which is a regulation that is adopted by the California PUC, requires there to be at least a 6-foot clearance between the transmission wires and any other equipment. And then we have the antenna on top of that. So that is why the increased height here is necessary compared to the light standards. And the neighbors are right. This will be roughly 10 feet taller than the existing pole, but it's because of GO 95 and these PUC regulations that have to do with the safety and the transmission lines. With respect to the notice, I can submit this. Again, the noticing radius is depicted here. This is again based on Article 25, and the notice radius is calculated from what comes, or with the pole being the epicenter of it. The names and the addresses, this has to be sent to both tenants and owners. These are pulled from DPW and planning's databases, and so if DPW and planning has the names, they'll specifically put the names. If they don't, then they don't. But it's meant to encompass both tenants and owners.
Thank you. For
with respect to undergrounding, if this district is undergrounded, obviously Verizon would have to remove that facility from that pole. The agreement that Verizon has with PG&E, they're allowing for this pole now. So PG&E doesn't see this as imminent enough to not allow Verizon to be on this pole.
Can that be revisited? I mean, in other words, were you all aware of the neighborhood's plan to underground all the utilities?
I imagine that the neighbors have to work with DPW and with PG&E to achieve that. And again, PG&E is allowing Verizon on this pole right now, so.
Is there anyone here from PG&E? No? Okay.
With respect to CEQA and environmental, hold on, 2 more things with respect to planning and DPW. Mr. Gladstone asked for a few things. One was for RF testing from the residents. The way that the conditions of approval are drafted, that is meant for post-installation testing. So meaning once the new facility is up and running, we will happily go to any neighbor's home who asks us to and have Hammett and Edison take the RF measurements, and the neighbors can see it right there, and they submit a report to the city. I suppose we could do it now, but that seems pointless. It would just kind of establish what the baseline RF is now, and I imagine that the neighbors' concern would be what happens after the facility is online, but I'll leave that to you and Mr. Gladstone to clarify. With respect to planning, going out and having a site visit and weighing view obstruction issues, that was done on the Green Street facility that we talked about earlier this morning. And I believe one of the other facilities, usually when the protester raises that in their protest, the planning department goes out and does that in advance of this protest hearing. I don't have any record that it was done here, but we have no objection to planning, going back out there and revisiting the view issue. With respect to the case law that Mr. Gladstone cited, you can talk to DPW. The case law.
Oh, case law, sorry.
Yeah, the initial case that Mr. Gladstone had presented, you're welcome to talk to your attorney, Bill Sanders, or DPW's attorney, Bill Sanders, about that. But, he left out a lot of relevant case law, a lot of which was done in San Francisco, Robinson versus San Francisco, and also San Francisco Beautiful versus San Francisco, where, they decided that these facilities were exempt under CEQA, and there's a lot of discussion about view obstruction and what constitutes view obstruction in this jurisdiction. Finally, with respect to view obstruction, Article 25 also has a technical definition for what constitutes view obstruction. It has to do with the distance from windows, existing buildings. It has to do with the measurements of the facility, and these comply with all Article 25 standards and meet the view obstruction definition. Do you have any other questions?
No, you answered my question about the undergrounding. I just want to understand, like, the sense, whether there's a sense of urgency to install this tower when we know that the neighborhood is in the process of undergrounding the utilities, and what does that all entail? So let's say we approve, the permit for the installation of the tower to go in, and 2 years from now, the neighbors have paid their fees and they're getting their street, newly undergrounded. What does that mean does the tower hardware go underground now? Like, is this something that can wait? Like, it just seems to me
Sure.
like we could table this.
So undergrounding, in many jurisdictions takes, between 10, 20 years. It's unclear to us where we are in this
I know
process.
it takes a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if
Just a second.
Some jurisdictions, and I would encourage you to do so here, some jurisdictions add a condition to the conditions of approval that say if the overhead transmission lines, if the PG&E poles are undergrounded, then Verizon has to remove their facility or underground their facility. There's different wordings. Again, you can work with your team on how to word that, but some jurisdictions will add that condition into the conditions of approval. But again, PG&E has given permission for Verizon to go forward with this. So in PG&E's view, this isn't imminent in that sense. And if the city is telling us, hey, we think this is going to happen in the next 6 months, obviously we're happy to talk about that. But there doesn't seem to be a definitive timeline that's been established.
Okay. Thank you for
Thank you.
addressing that. Mr. Goldstone?
Yes, could I have another minute, please, just to address some things?
Okay, I'm going to ask everybody if they're okay with you having another minute. Is everybody okay with him having another
Mind?
minute?
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to hear you last. Okay.
Yeah.
1 minute, Mr.
Just a
Goldstone.
couple things. First of all,
Gladstone, sorry.
Brett Gladstone, with all due respect, the regulations don't say that planning is to come out to a public area. It says planning is to come out to each individual home. So that was an incorrect fact. You can look at your regulations. Secondly, and the fact that that hasn't been done, I think, is alone one good reason. If you're not going to.
Let me just interrupt you for a second. What it sounds like you're requesting is that you want them to come out and measure the existing frequencies as they are now? Okay.
No,
What are you
I
asking?
understand the point made by the provider, Verizon, that RF emissions don't get measured till it's installed.
Right.
I'm not contesting that.
Okay.
But your regulations say that the planning department, if asked, and I've asked, will come out to each individual resident and measure, will take a look at the view issue.
Okay.
And that hasn't been done. And if you don't turn it down, which we hope.
Are you asking that?
We at least request that we wait until that's done. I've made an informal request for that. And we would like that to happen.
So to be clear.
Yes.
You're asking the planning department to come to each individual resident.
Correct.
Residents to look at view obstruction.
Yes, and aesthetics.
Okay.
And the other point I wanted to make is that the comment was made that PG&E has no problem with this going forward. Well, I'm sorry to tell you that PG&E hasn't been informed yet by DPW that there's an undergrounding petition. And of course, it's natural that PG&E has advised us to go forward because it doesn't know that there's an undergrounding petition underway. And I believe PG&E would feel otherwise once DPW does let them know. Finally,
Thank you.
it only takes a year to two to get the installation done. I've read the regulations. What takes 20 to 30 years is the payment. The payment for undergrounding gets put on each property owner's property tax, and these property owners will pay about $2,500 a year for 20 to, well, actually close to 30 years. But the undergrounding, as I understand, doesn't wait till the end of that period.
Okay.
So we think it's much closer than stated. Thank you very
So
much.
we're looking at 2 to 5 years?
We believe it'll be no more than 2 years,
Okay.
and perhaps even 1. It says 1 to 2 years.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Have Public Works like to come and make a comment on this item?
So we had a few protesters claim view obstruction on this particular application for 18 WR 0429. And they've claimed view obstruction already, and planning has re-reviewed the application. I have planning's letter if you want me to read it out to everyone.
Yes, please.
Okay, per referral from Public Works, planning has reviewed the comments submitted in opposition to the proposed small cell site on the replacement wood pole located adjacent to 2430 Broadway Street. In light of the protests specifically related to claims of view obstruction, planning has reviewed the application materials for application 18 WR 0429. Pursuant to Article 25, Section 2, Part B, Definition 39, planning is required to determine if a proposed facility would significantly obstruct view and/or light into a surrounding residential window. Article 25 recommends that the proposed mounting of side-mounted low-profile equipment enclosures should not be within 6 feet away from a residential window, and the proposed pole top antenna should not be within 8 feet from a residential window. The proposed replacement pole and proposed attachment wireless facility would be located approximately 27 feet and 6 inches away from the building at 2430 Broadway Street. The proposed design of the wireless attachments would be in compliance with local and state requirements. As such, planning has determined that the proposed wireless installation would not substantially obstruct views from a window or block light into a residential window at 2430 Broadway Street or adjacent buildings in the vicinity. For this reason, the planning department determined that the proposed wireless facility would comply with the compatibility standards for a Tier B personal wireless service facility site permit pursuant to Article 25 of Public Works Code. Thank you.
Thank you, Leo. Okay. Yes, I'll allow it.
I just want to point out the obvious fact that the
Your name
planning letter
again?
refers to one
Your name
address.
again?
Steve Mohebbi,
Thank you.
2417 Broadway. The address noted is the Cash home. Or the Dempsey home, which is their next door neighbor, which is one home out of dozens upon dozens that are going to be staring at this protrusion, not the least of which are the uphill neighbors not on Broadway, but on Pacific, which are very much part of the notification radius. And just to contextualize in case you can't picture it or if you're not strolling through our neighborhood on a regular basis. So Pacific is quite a steep uphill above Broadway on this block with dead-on views of the Bay, Golden Gate Bridge, Alcatraz. These are premium homes with top dollar views. And it's a horribly obvious fact that you're dealing now with something as sticky as property rights and property values, having a big finger stick up in the middle of what is a panorama view.
Okay.
Those of us on Broadway don't have, on my side of the Broadway block, don't have that panorama bay view from the lower floors, but we actually do from the upper floors. So it's just like, it's like a Dilbert comic strip. Like the one home in front of this tower has a citation in this letter saying it's 27 feet 6 inches away. No problem.
Okay.
But there's dozens of homes looking at this tower. I mean, it's just like, I can't even believe somebody would write a letter so narrow like that.
Okay. Thank you very much. Sure.
And I live at 2404, which is next door to the home that we were just talking about. And the pole actually encroaches on our driveway. We have a shared driveway with the house next door.
Okay.
And 2/3 of the pole is in the driveway. I don't think the biggest problem is the view. I think the biggest problem is that this street has become a dumping ground for anything that they want to put on a pole, because the entire area, all the other utilities are underground. There's 2 blocks in our neighborhood that are not underground, and that's our block and another block.
Okay.
So anytime there's something that needs to be put on a pole, they do it in front of our house.
Okay.
While I was out of town 4 or 5 years ago, they actually installed a pole in front of my front door,
Yeah, I
which
think
is
you're
60 feet from the other pole, which I don't see any of the poles that close. So it's 60 feet from the other pole, and there is a cell tower on that. So within 60 feet, we already have a cell tower on the street.
How's service in your neighborhood?
Well, it depends if you use Verizon or you use AT&T.
Okay.
But I just wanted to make that point. If I might, I missed a little bit of the meeting.
Yeah.
I must see if I had any other things that I wanted to. Okay. The only other point I wanted to make is we're in a very high property tax area. And this stuff is extremely unsightly. And
Okay.
it seems like we could do better. And
Thank
we
you.
are willing to pay to put the utilities underground.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Cash. Any other neighbors want to comment? Okay, we're going to hear from Ms. Sengupta. Were you going to speak? You already? I did hear from you already. Okay. All right. Thank you. It's a little bit of a blur. All right. Thank you all so much for your comments. I really appreciate, I haven't forgotten you. I really appreciate just all the research and the detail that you all have taken. Honestly, it was very, very helpful. And we'll be following up with you. I may reach out to some of you for clarification later on a few things, but I have my questions, and this is being recorded, so I'm going to go back and listen to everyone's testimony as well, along with my notes. So that being said, since we've heard from everyone, I'm going to close out this last item. I'm not closing the hearing because we have to hear from someone on Green Street, but we're closing out item number 18WR0429 for 2430 Broadway Street. And then lastly, we're just going to hear comments briefly regarding item number 18WR0185 for 2735 Green Street. Thank you all. We've heard already from Public Works as well as from the Verizon representatives, so you're here to leave your comments on this item.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so thanks again. My daughter got sick. My neighbor asked if I could just show two things. He also had an emergency come up.
Okay,
Can I
what's your
just-
name? And
Oh.
then make sure that.
Kayleen Patel.
Okay.
I live at 2735 Green Street, which is also the address of the proposed antenna,
Okay.
or 18 WR0185. So I'll just show you briefly my neighbor's pictures that he asked that I bring.
Okay.
So this is a mock-up of what the antenna would look like from his office bedroom.
Okay. Okay.
And that is from his children's bedroom.
Okay.
So he's my next door neighbor, and we have a similar view. This is my house.
Okay.
The one in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a mock-up of what it would look like with the antenna.
Okay.
So a few things I just wanted to go over. The first is it would block light and view. I think everyone is concerned with that, but we have a little bit of a unique situation in that my children have a bedroom right outside of this antenna, and there happens to be quite a large pane of glass. All of the studies that I've been reading about the antenna discuss how, first of all, the radiation is low below the antenna. They never reference it, at direct height of the antenna. And the second thing they reference is how much gets filtered out by walls. And in my case, it's almost entirely glass. This is a bedroom that my son and daughter share. And it's exposure of 11 hours a day of sleeping. Not to mention study time. So you compound that over several years. I understand it's a low level of radiation, but as everyone has said, studies have not been done. And because it's right in front of our bedroom this bedroom window with a unique pane of glass that is larger than most residents, I feel like this is a uniquely poor site for an antenna.
Okay. Mrs. Patel,
Yes.
did you send any of this documentation to Public Works ahead of time?
A documentation of,
Your comments as well as your neighbor's comments?
yes, we
to
both did
petition
an
you
online protest.
Okay, great.
Yes.
So I'll have your comments.
Yes, they weren't as
support.
detailed as this.
Okay.
I happened to notice the notice of for this on the light pole.
Okay.
And I called because I hadn't noticed it, and they said it was the last day to file a petition, and I hadn't received
Okay.
anything. So I did put in my comments, but they were brief. This is a little nitpicky, but in the report that was filed in the city, they described the neighborhood as being set back. Most of the homes are set back, that they rarely exceed 35 feet in height. I think that's a mischaracteristic of the neighborhood. Only my home and one other home is set back. My home is 34 feet. It's the same height as two other homes, and out of the other 20 homes, they're all taller. So I think that's an indicator that this antenna would be at direct level with most of the homes. As has been spoken before, it's a historic neighborhood. With all of the homes on our block that are starred being showed as historic, including the Russian consulate, which is not listed, but it is on the block. As was mentioned before with the Lion Street stairs, it's also a tourist destination We have a lot of people coming off the stairs and then walking down Green, which is at the bottom of the stairs. The last point, which I think is the most important, is that this is not necessary. We have so many antennas. This is from a website, antennasearch.com, that shows all of the Nextel and Verizon, all of the different antennas in our neighborhood. And the closest one is a cell tower that is quite close. This is standing at the end of my block. You can look up and see the green fencing right here. That's this cell tower, which is 116 feet in height. And standing from that cell tower, you can see our entire neighborhood. That big building right here, that's the Russian consulate. All of these buildings, that's my block. And that's standing at ground level, not 116 feet high, where the huge cell tower is. So it's getting all of these homes. And it's only 686 feet from my house.
Okay.
So again, there's a map.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ms. Patel, thank you for coming. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Yes, please.
So these comments are directed more towards Ms. Patel rather than you, because I know that you have these reports that Hammett and Edison have prepared. And so I just want to be clear about this site. This is a bidirectional antenna, meaning it faces two directions. Those two directions are 80 and 260 degrees, which are up and down the street, not into their home. Secondly, this facility is 120 watts. It's a very low wattage facility. These are what we call small cells rather than towers. The picture of the tower that Ms. Patel showed earlier, I'm not sure which carrier's tower that is, but the purpose of these small cells is to fill in the different pockets that the towers are not able to reach, and that's why they're low wattage. That's why, they're safe to put in neighborhoods, and that's why they're relatively close together. Because of their low wattage, their reach is very low. The RF reports that Hammett and Edison prepare, and DPH provides the format for that. They have an 11-point checklist. They look at what the calculated RF emissions would be, both on the ground and at adjacent buildings. And so they looked at the adjacent building here, which would be Ms. Patel's home by her account, and the calculated percentage there is 0.49% of the FCC's limit. So it's a tiny fraction of the FCC's already conservative limits. With respect to the historic nature and the views, I think we addressed all of that earlier. And as you know, Article 25 and the companion DPW order does not protect private views.
Thank you.
May I respond to one thing on that?
I'll allow it. I'll allow it briefly.
She just said she didn't know whose tower that was, but Verizon is listed right there as being one of the companies that has use of that tower, the 116-foot tower that's only 686 feet away. And from their own material, they discuss those towers as having coverage up to a broad area of several miles.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Patel. Did you have some documents you wanted to leave with us? Okay, great. If you can give them to Ms. Stevens, I'd appreciate that. All righty, well, I think that's it. So we're officially closing out 18WR0185 for 2735 Green Street. Thank you, everyone, for your comments. Please make sure that you signed in so that we have your contact information to notify you of the director's recommendations. I want to thank Public Works staff for the presentations, and Ms. Stevens, our clerk today. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Closing out.